Reknistan. Hey guys, UWG Nick here, and welcome to a Sunday Snippet, a very special Sunday Snippet for me, as I get to present to you my daughter. This is is she 9 days old now, something like that? Her mother's on standby next to me because she doesn't trust my arm. I don't trust it either. But yeah, 9 days old, full head of hair. She was born this way. She had a bit of a rocky start that I will tell you about later in this video, but she's great now. She's a hungry little beast, and she sleeps like a baby, so to speak. She has been really good to us with the sleeping. We get about 6 to 8 hours of sleep every night with her, which is very unusual for new parents. Usually new parents run on about 2 hours of sleep per night maximum. But yeah, she's doing great. Her name is Linnea, and she is going to be a star in some way. But right now, she's getting a bit upset, and I think she wants her mommy. So mommy will have to come take her. So yeah, that was my daughter. As I said, her name is Linnea. She's 9 days old, and she was born on the 10th of May in the morning. Let me tell you the story about how it came to be. The pregnancy, not so much interesting, but on the 8th. Well, actually, 9th. On the 9th at about 2 in the morning, my girlfriend started having cramps every 15 minutes. Quite painful cramps. Or contractions, not cramps, contractions. And we decided to hold off from going to the hospital at that point still, because the rule is 10 minutes in between, then you kind of should go to the hospital. So 9, or was it even earlier? Maybe 9 in the morning, something like that. We went to... Yeah, something like that. 9 in the morning, we went to the hospital, and she was taken in, and they checked, and they said that her water had broken at some point during the pregnancy, but nobody could really tell when. It was just well, there's no water anymore there, so it has broken. We just don't know when. And we were all all right. And that was weird to us because we thought at least it would be visible. But apparently this is not uncommon, that the water breaks, and it breaks in such a precision that just a little bit of the fluid can leak out at a time, which means that the mother never really realizes it, that she just thinks it's something else, or there's a lot of stuff going on down there during the pregnancy, especially that late in the pregnancy. So a little bit yucky details, but yeah, she hadn't noticed anything, and it was all right, well, then she kept having contractions, and they started getting closer and closer, and towards the end they were in 3 or 4 minutes in between, and they were very painful. I've never seen her in quite that much pain. Some of the contractions really made her she kind of almost lost control of her legs. She just slumped down and just held on to something, knuckle white and sobbing, and it wasn't fun to watch. And considering if that started 2 in the morning, it took 36 hours of that before the ordeal was finished, so it wasn't fun. She got, of course, painkillers, but they couldn't give too many painkillers to her early on, because they're we need to kind of figure out you need to know what's going on, so to speak. And there's also a limit when the neck of the womb, I don't know if that is the correct term, there's probably a medical term for this, but in translation would be the neck of the womb, the opening in the womb where the baby will, the bottleneck that the baby needs to pass through. When that's open to a certain point, you get the epidural, which is a painkiller injection straight into your spine, your spinal cortex, and that thing numbs you very, very well. And it took her almost 24 hours or something before she got that. She had some lighter painkillers before that worked for a couple of hours at a time, but it wasn't a fun experience for her. Anyways, we were closing in. We spent the night there. I slept on the floor next to her. For some reason, the hospital didn't they don't have beds for non-patients. I guess that's not that weird, but they could have had at least a comfy chair. They had this really... In every room there was a rocking chair, which I like. Rocking chairs are good, and they're especially good when you're just sitting there and have nothing to do because you're just sitting there and rock. So good idea on that. Bad idea is that they were completely made out of wood, and they weren't comfortable in any way. In the beginning they felt comfortable, but after a while the back of the chair was these wooden tines, so to speak, and they started digging into my muscles. So no matter how I sat on it, I could feel it bruising my back muscles. That was uncomfortable as shit. That's why I was sleeping on the floor as well. I couldn't stand the chair after 24 hours. Anyways, my pain was nothing. So like that's my experience. I'm telling this from my eyes, and I can say what I felt, what I could see from her. It looked a lot worse, and I think any woman who has given birth is like, you're gonna tell the story about giving birth, and you're gonna talk about the pain that you felt from sitting in a chair. Like, what the fuck are you on? Which is very true. I lift my hats to women who give birth in any way, naturally, drugged up or otherwise, because that shit looked rough. Anyway, so we spent the night. I slept on the floor, and in the morning they started like checking her up more. The neck of the womb had only opened about halfway, 5 centimeters of what they needed it to be before you can start pushing. But at that time, her blood pressure was going wonky, and suddenly she spiked a fever. About 36 hours in, she spiked a fever from the normal body temperature is like 36.8 on average, and hers went up to like 39.5. At 40 degrees, it starts to get like really, really dangerous, even for people who aren't pregnant, and like just anybody. You should not go over 40. If you're at 40, you need medical attention like stat, like yesterday. So she went up to 39.5, and the doctors just threw their hands in there and said, fuck this, it's coming out. So she was wheeled in to a cesarean, and I got to dress down in scrubs and wash my hands and all stuff like that, and I got to be in the operating room with my girlfriend as they cut her open. They had like a sheet covering her from like chest height, so she was lying in this kind of like what do you call it, crucified position. So she was on the table, but her hands were laid out, like splayed out to the side in these holders, I guess, like metal holders. I don't think she was strapped down. I can't say for sure, but I don't think she was strapped down, but she was just like lying there like this. And she had a sheet going from here, and I was sitting on like her face side of that sheet, so I could talk to her and like be supportive, as much support as I could offer while the doctors worked. I found this out afterwards, but Annette said it was kind of interesting to be rolled into the table and put in that position. They were preparing the operation, and the doctor comes in, pulls on gloves, and goes like, I haven't done this in such a long time, like, let's see how this goes. And she was just like, oh yeah, that's great. But it was a female surgeon, and from what I can see of her work afterwards, like the scar that she left, she was great, like really fantastic, because the scar that Annette has is like just a thin line with a little bit of swollen skin, and it's probably gonna disappear completely and just leave a like slight line, a white line. Her cesarean, because they had time to prepare, and it wasn't like a critical, like, yeah, sure, they needed to do it fast, but they were still like, you know, we got time, so they didn't cut her up vertically, but horizontally, so kind of like just below the panty line, in the same kind of direction as the panty line as well, would go on the front, on the stomach. That's kind of where they sliced it. So, you know, didn't leave like a nasty scar or a terribly visible scar in any way. Anyways, they cut her open, and I was sitting there holding my girlfriend's hand and talking to her. And then we heard the first cry of Linnea, and that was one of those like really big moments in life. I didn't see her at that point yet. I only heard that first cry, and that was like this really big, like, wow kind of moment. And Annette as well, both of us were teary-eyed, and Annette's tears were rolling down her cheeks on the side because she couldn't move. She was just lying there. And unfortunately though, the cry went into a gargle. Like, it went into that, you've all seen American movies when the child is born, that first wah kind of sound, and then it went into wah, like almost like she was drowning. And I was like, hang on, that's not right. The next thing I saw was when they cut the umbilical cord. Again, something that you usually get to do as the father yourself if she's born naturally, but this was a cesarean, so they just lifted her out and they immediately cut the cord. So the only thing I saw that was blood splatter on the screen. Like, I was sitting behind it, just like splat. I was like, oh, that's bad. So I was a bit worrying as well. Then they just carried her around the sheet and went like, here's your baby. And Annette was like, great. She didn't even say anything. She just looked at her. They were like, here's your baby, and we're gonna go. And then they told me like, come along. And I was like, okay. So I got up and I walked with them as they took her to get patted down, like get all the mucus off of her from the amniotic sac, like amniotic fluid, wipe that down. And they started massaging her, and they immediately put like breathing tubes into her nose to give her extra oxygen. And then they started like listing, like very professionally listing things like, like child was born this day, this time and this time. She was at first seemed to be doing great, but has declined rapidly since then. She's now 5 minutes old and almost not breathing at all on her own. Like, my suggestion is to intubate, and then the other doctor was like, yes, I concur, let's intubate. And they started cutting a hose. I remember that they said a 12.5 centimeter hose. And at this point, she had like, her color had gotten better from the massage, and they were still feeding her oxygen. But at this point, they were like, we would like you to leave the room. And I was like, but I would prefer to see this. And they were like, no, you don't want to see it. It might be an interesting procedure, but this is your own child. This, to me, doesn't really make sense, because I was never offended, or I never felt this like need to protect her from what they were doing, because I know that the doctors were there to help her. So whatever they would have done, I would have supported. I would have been like, all right, it has to be done so she can like do good. Even if they started cutting toes off her with a scissor, I'd be like, the doctors probably know what they're doing. So I would have allowed it, and I wouldn't have been too worried. And that was the kind of state of mind I was in, and I always am, so to speak. I trust doctors very much, and but they still wanted me to leave. I guess it's also to kind of protect the doctors from not feeling too much pressure, or having a new father staring over their shoulder. Or maybe if people are more emotional and have this like very protective, like a very strong instinctive protective urge, animalistic almost, so that when they start doing things that can be very uncomfortable for the baby, that they start getting involved, like trying to make it, like, how it is when somebody's trying to help but just makes it worse. I guess that's what they were worried about. So they sent me out, and then they intubated my daughter. What that means is they shoved a hose down her nose, through her throat, down her breathing canal, and into like to the point where the breathing canal, I don't know what it's called, is it? Oh, the windpipe, like down the windpipe to the point where it separates into the two lungs, like right here. It goes one channel that way, one channel that way. So it went through her throat, between her vocal cords, and all the way down to here. And then they just started like pretty much pushing in air. After this, I didn't see my daughter for quite a while. They took her up to like this intensive care kind of place, and I went back to Annette and stayed with her as she came out of her drug haze and off the painkillers and stuff like that. Well, not all of them, because as she was sliced open, she was on painkillers for a few days after this. But like they did all the after work from putting the baby out, like checking that the womb was doing the right thing, and like lifting out all the things that shouldn't be in there and things like that, sewing her up. And I was there with her. A couple of hours later, I got to go see my daughter, and she was up in intensive care still with the intubation. And then I got to see the machine that was like helping her breathe. And it was interesting to see, because they had like this meter, almost like an EKG, like a heartbeat curve, that showed her breathing, that was green, and then the line turned red and kept rising, and then down again to green. And they told me that the green part is her breath, and when that one ends is when the machine has to start pushing in more air in order for her to get enough oxygen. And they could also like regulate how much oxygen she had. I think she started out with a 37% increase in oxygen to her in her breathing air, just to keep her like healthy in her brain, because the brain suffers from oxygen deprivation. Don't let little babies get stuff around their throat or anything like that. You can seriously fuck up their development. Either way, at this point, I actually got to look like a little bit better at her. I have some pictures. Maybe I'll show some pictures during this during this video, edit them in. I might have shown also already one which was the first one ever taken, and that was when she was on the table with just a normal hose down her nose to help her breathe. And then later, maybe now, you'll see what she looked like as she was lying on the table intubated. And she stayed like this, away from our care, away from her mother's care for, was it like 4 or 5 days, I think, maybe 4 days, before she was well enough that they felt like, yeah, there's no need for us to keep her here. She can move down to the room with her mother and stay with her for a couple of nights. Still at the hospital though. Let's see if I can find like a way to keep this like coherent so I don't jump back and forth in time too much. Yeah, so she was at the table, she was at the intensive care, breathing apparatus in her nose. And they also gave her fluids like antibiotics and stuff like that, because it turned out the reason she was having trouble breathing was because she had an infection inside of her. And we're still not sure if the infection came from Annette, because Annette also had an infection, like sepsis, which is like poisoning of the blood, I think. And so both of them had this infection, both of them got antibiotics, but in the end, they never really bothered finding out what infection it was specifically. Now, this sounds like they weren't doing their jobs, but I disagree with this. They took blood samples and they had the bacteria to kind of develop to find out what it was, but as soon as they noticed that the antibiotics they were giving her were working for both Annette and for Linnea, mother and daughter, they were like, it doesn't matter what type it is, we'll just kill it, we'll nuke it with antibiotics, and done deal. So even in the statement that we got from the hospital, is like, it's unclear what bacteria it was, but we got all the infection values and how they have gone down and things like that, so everything was great. One thing that bothered me during this time though was, like, before pregnancy we had gone to all these like educational things, like how the birth would normally happen and what was important after the birth and things like that. And there were things like the baby needs to get skin to skin contact as soon as possible to stay close to the mother in order to feel calm. Same thing, if the mother can't hold her for a reason or whatever, then the dad would have her on your chest, I would have her on my chest, just to get heat and the smells to kind of like relax her. Also, not feeding from bottle for the first couple of weeks was important in order for them to not get too used to the bottle and not want to use the natural way of feeding, so to speak, because it's a lot harder for them to feed from the tit than it is from the bottle. The bottle gives a lot more fluid and a lot more food a lot faster, whereas they have to work a lot harder when they're suckling out the teat. So but all these things were just thrown into the wind when this happened. Because, as I said, she was taken away from us and we couldn't hold her or really grab her or do anything with her for a number of days afterwards. The nurses were handling her, of course, but most of the time she was just on a table wrapped up in a blanket with tubes in her throat and neck and needles in her head and hand to give her all the things. So it was a bit rough. And the first time we went to visit her together was actually like 4 or 6 hours after the operation. I wheeled Annette up with her bed to well, I didn't wheel. There was a nurse with us as well, but we wheeled her up to the care unit in her bed, and we went and looked at the baby. And yeah, Annette stood there for like an hour straight, even though she had just been operated on. She stood there with and just looked at her and like admired her. And while we were there, Linnea started crying, and that was rough to see, because as I said, the tube went through her vocal cords, so she was making the face and the movements of like really hard crying, but the only thing we could hear was like her breath gurgling in the machine, kind of like at a higher explosive kind of rate, like how a baby would cry, like that. Wah, that push made the machine go like that kind of thing. And she was doing like a complete crying face and like tightening up and shit, but no sound. And that was really weird to watch. It was really strange, and it did tug at your heartstrings, definitely. But yeah, nothing to do. I mean, we trust, as I said, we trusted the doctors. We knew what was best. They knew what was best for her, and so on. And the division that she was on is one of the best in the country, and things like that. So we had complete faith. But it was emotionally rough to watch. Either way, she was there for like 4 or 5 days until they realized, like, or they came to the conclusion that her infection values had gone down so much that there was no risk anymore. Then she went down to live with my girlfriend in her room for a couple of days while my girlfriend recovered, and she kept getting her antibiotics. And then on Wednesday this week, which was, let me check real quick. On Wednesday, which was the 16th, they both got released from the hospital, and they came home. But we still had to go to the hospital for like Wednesday night, Thursday morning, and Thursday night to get antibiotics injected in through her needles. So she had, for the first few days, even here at home, she still had like a needle stuck in her head with a like a faucet, kind of like a vent kind of thing. I don't know, a valve, like a permanent needle with a valve that they just connected to when they gave her the medicine. So it was on Thursday night that we finally got to like see her without tubings or needles or wires connected to her. That was a pretty good moment. Yeah, and since then we've been staying at home, and she has been fantastic. She's super cute. When she was born, she looked very much like a little troll. She had her full head of hair when she was born, which is rare. Even the nurses over at the hospital are like, wow, that's so much hair on the baby. Like, oh my god. Everybody was really surprised about that, which was, kind of funny. My family has strong hair growth. My dad is 76 or something like now. He still has a full head of hair, so counting on our genes on that side. And yeah, she's been really, really nice. She hasn't cried a lot, and she sleeps during the night like strangely well. Most young parents have like this, they get to sleep like an hour and then they have to wake up and take care of the baby, and then an hour again. Linnea has been like, on Thursday night, I think, when she first came home when we finally got all the needles and stuff out, we decided to wash her. She was a week old then, so we washed her off just with water and stuff like that. But after that, she slept for 8 hours straight through the night. She went to sleep at around, 10 in the evening. She fell asleep on my chest as I was watching a movie. And then I took her to bed. She didn't wake up. She kept sleeping. I went to bed. We're like, okay, prepared for the worst, like she's going to wake up in the middle of the night. Slept until 6. And then she just woke up with like, she wanted food. And that was it. And that's how it's continued. Like, she sleeps almost through the whole night. And in the morning when she wakes up, she doesn't cry. She just kind of starts like like that, and like kind of her mouth starts wandering, like looking for a nipple wherever she is. So it's just like, oh, she wants food. And then you connect her to the teat, and off we go, off to the races. So she's been a really, really sweet kid. That doesn't mean there hasn't been issues though, because on what was it? Let's see. Thursday. Wait, have I shifted everything one day? Is it maybe on Wednesday evening? When did I get operated on? I've been home for 2 nights. Yeah, so she must have come home on Wednesday, because on Thursday, the 17th, 2 days ago, is when I was operated on. And that was the day after they came home. So I think I have like the whole thing like shifted one day. And if you're following along, you can check. Most of you don't care. So that's the issue. Like, I was operated on, and I now have taken off my bandage so you can see what it looks like. It's I'm standing leaning over my table here, so it kind of looks weird, but that's what the wound looks like. That's where they cut me open, and those little rings that you see are actually metal. That squishes the wound together, I guess, to keep everything in place while he heals. And what they did was they cut me open here, and then they went in digging for the muscle. They pulled it back up. They screwed like a U-shaped screw into my the bone of my arm, and through that they hooked metal wires with an anchoring, so it's anchored back like to my bone, the muscle. So it's now like the way it should be, more or less the way it should be connected to me. But it's gonna take about 4 weeks for me. I'm gonna have to wear the sling for about 4 weeks, and after that I'm gonna rehabilitate, and in 3 months time I should be back to my normal self and be able to lift heavy again, which is good because I can feel my weight gaining just from this 1 month that I haven't been able to exercise. Because the weird thing is, like, you get used to a certain amount of exercise, which means you burn a certain amount of calories, and you adapt your appetite to kind of fit that need, so you stay on a very plain field unless you're trying to cut or trying to bulk, but otherwise it just kind of like evens out, so you stay the same weight with this kind of exercise. When you stop exercising, your appetite doesn't drop. You're used to this one type, like this one amount of food, and if you don't get that, you get hungry. So it tends to be like you stop exercising but you keep eating the same way, which to the people out there who understand energy balances and maybe a little bit of diet, that means you gain weight, like more in than out. That means weight goes up. So I'm really looking forward to start being able to exercise again, because I need to burn these pregnancy kilos off, or rather baby weight off. But yeah, so that's where we are. I'm operated on. My kid is home. She's well. She's doing great. And yeah, do I have any cool stories? Well, yes, there are actually already a number of funny stories that have happened with our kid. I have a feeling that the following Sunday Snippets will be largely like around my child and my experience as a father, because that's like the biggest thing that's going on right now. But whenever I can figure out something else to talk about, I will, because I know that these kid stories, these child stories, are mostly interesting to me and nobody else. Like, you know how everybody like shares pictures of their kids on Facebook, and you just keep getting spammed with like, isn't she cute? Ah! And I hate that, but I get it now, because holy shit, my kid is cute. She's like the sweetest thing ever, and she's just like so amazing. But I'm not dumb enough to think that everybody else thinks that. I know that this is very much a personal feeling. I get excited over her, what she can do. I get excited over like the stories I can tell, like experience I have with her, and I think she's the cutest thing in history. But you guys probably don't give a shit. To you, she's just another kid, like every other person's kid has been to me for the last 33 years. So if I can figure out something else to talk about, I will. But let me tell you these stories because they're funny. So the day we washed her, she had like glue in her hair from the tape that had been over the needles that were stuck in the head. So she had like tape in her hair, or like glue residue from the tape in her hair. And whenever I've needed to take off a sticker or get rid of glue on my skin or something like that, I have used baby oil. It works really good, because baby oil, like oil is usually used in glue, and oil is oil. So like dissolves like, that kind of thing. So I figured, like, we'll just put some baby oil in her hair, rub it out, then wash it with soap, and it'll be gone. And when we were putting her into the bathtub, I was like, I had this little bottle of baby bathing oil, which is you put in the water in order to like cover the surface, and when the baby comes out, it doesn't dry out their skin. It like gets a little extra greasing, so she doesn't get too dry. It's a good idea to give the babies. I just assumed that this oil would be the same consistency and type as baby oil. Any male adult over a certain age should know what baby oil feels like, and if not, you're missing out. Get a bottle. But it's this like viscous, thin, oily liquid that's very easy to wash off, and it doesn't leave much of residue. So I took the bottle of bath oil and assumed it was the same, and just put like a few drips in her hair, and I started rubbing it in, and that shit was thick. It turned into like this Vaseline-y goo on her hair. I'm not sure if it was a chemical reaction with the glue, which there wasn't much of to begin with, so I seriously doubt it, or if it was just the consistency of the oil, which I really feel is the case, or maybe it started like reacting with her normal grease or something, but it turned like this really thick Vaseline-y stuff. And we were like, oh fuck, how are we gonna get this out? So I was washing the baby and just in water, and my girlfriend was like, well, we have this like mild baby soap, we can try that. So we took some of that, rubbed it in her hair. No dice, it didn't do fuck all. So at this point we were like, all right, we need something else. So I picked up the baby. I was standing there like, what can we use? And we were like, well, we can't use like actual soap because that is so rough, it'll dry her out immediately. It's weird when you have a baby, you think everything is dangerous to them. So we were like, fuck, like, just what do we have here? And Annette found this little container of like this mild soap that's in a, it had like this special dispenser. I think it's pressurized actually. And it has like a portion thing going. But it had gotten stuck somehow earlier when we've used it ourselves. So we hadn't used it for a long time. And it was like, she was trying to get it to work, and I was like, that thing is stuck, and I don't know. And at this point, the baby started crying, probably because she got cold. So I was like holding her in my hand, and she was cold and crying. And my girlfriend was stressing out because she was like trying to get it fixed, but like working the thing, and it didn't work. And I know she was hammering it somehow, but for some fucked up reason, she managed to shoot a glob of the damn soap really hard straight up into my eye. So it actually like shot up my eyelid, so it went up here, and that was insanely painful for me. I went blind. I was like, I couldn't even open my other eye, which wasn't soapy, because both my eyes went like, nope, shut. So I was holding a screaming baby in my hand that was getting cold, squeezing my eyes shut, suffering, and my girlfriend was just shaking like from the whole situation, like complete like utter disaster kind of thing. It was just, it felt terrible, like the whole thing. It was just fucking chaos. In the end, like, I just like gave the baby to her. I went and washed my face for a while. When I came back, we wrapped the baby into a thick like bath towel kind of thing, and then we tried again, and we just kind of held the baby's head over the bathtub and washed it out with soap. But then something funny happened. The baby went completely calm. She just calmed down. She was like, I'm okay with this. And she was just acting like she was at the hairdresser, you know, like when they shampoo your hair over the table thing, those little sinks. She was just like that. She was just like staring around, looking around at us, and we was washing her hair. She was like, this is cool. I was like, all right. So after that, we finally got her clean, and that's when she slept like 8 hours straight. I think it was just a very, very exhausting situation for her. Poor thing. The other funny thing that happened is one of those things that I wish I had a camera for, because it would have gone viral and I would have been fucking famous. I was changing her diapers. She had just peed a little bit, so it was like no biggie. I was just, you know, throw away the old diaper, wipe her down, put some powder on her so she stays dry. And then as I was sliding like a new diaper underneath her, I picked her up by the legs and lifted. At the same time, she projectile shat. Like a 6-foot stream of pressurized yellow poo just went flying across the room and completely covered my right arm. Sprayed all over the floor and almost hit the wall on the other side of the room. My girlfriend was standing next to me. She just lost her fucking shit, but she can't laugh because when she does, it hurts her. So she was like standing there like breathing like some, I don't know what kind of animal, like a pig, trying to not laugh, because when she laughs her belly, like her stomach jumps and the scar and everything. So she was like laughing in pain almost, and I was just standing there in shock, completely covered in shit. I was like, what the fuck just happened? And the kid was blowing soap bubbles, or like bubbles on the table, going like, ooh, making noises. And I was just like, what the fuck kind of poop cannon was this? And this has happened later as well, not to this extent, because after this, both me and Annette have, like, whenever we lift her and we like hear a rumble in her stomach, we're just like, cover that shit up, because it comes out with pressure. I guess it's her stomach is still reacting to like the milk, so it's building up gas, which makes her a pressurized cannon. But either way, it was fucking insane. So yeah, it's great being a parent. You should try it if you're of age, and if you're actually, you know what, make your own decision. It's cool being a parent, I'll give you that. But if you should be a parent, make up your own mind, because this shit is stressful, I have to admit. But yeah, that was this Sunday Snippet. Probably one of the most special ones for me ever, since I got to introduce you to my daughter and introduce her to the world. Not something I will ever probably get to do again. At least not for the first time. I mean, I might have another kid and then that'll be special again, but this one will hold a special place in my heart forever. So yeah, I guess that's about it. I've finished, talking about this channel, I've now finished Subnautica, Path of Exile, and I have played through Final Fantasy 15, though those videos are still coming up. I might make one last video of Final Fantasy 15, which is just going to be bonus content, end game crap. But I have to say, like, that game was slightly disappointing. The ending was slightly disappointing, and I think the end game is also quite bland. So, I don't know. It's like a 7 maybe is my score on that game. It's not great. It's fun. It's a good experience if like the story, and if you like these kind of if you really like the relationship between the guys and like their thing, and maybe you want to play the DLCs of each of the character, then it might be worth it for you. But I'd say don't pay full price, because as a contained game, I'm not impressed with it, I have to say. But yeah, so Subnautica, Path of Exile, and Final Fantasy is over for me, and now I'm just working on Far Cry 5. But I always want to have 2 games running at the same time on the channel. Today I went to Steam and checked what was popular right now, and none of the games really interested me that much. So I might actually have another look at that Ghibli game, what's it called, Ni no Kuni 2. So I might start playing that on the channel quite soon. I love the art style of that game. It still attracts me, though I think it's a more, kind of slightly more childish game than childish games than the other games I play. Ni no Kuni 1 was as well very magical, very fantastical, very fairy tale kind of type game. Even though it had some heavy subjects and heavy themes, the way it was presented was very child friendly. And I think Ni no Kuni 2 is probably going to follow the same kind of path, so to speak. But yeah, that's probably what I'm going to play in the future. Well, if you want blood, Far Cry 5. I'm still playing that. So, yeah, I think that's going to be it for now. I also made a 16 personality test, but that video turned out to be 2 hours long when I went through the test and talked about my personal stories and opinions and things like that. So I don't know really what to do with it. Nobody wants to watch, I think, a 2-hour video of me exploring who I am, like what personality type I am. But I might just release it as a fucking bonus content some Sunday or something like that. You watch it if you want to. The test was absolutely fantastic. Like it nailed me so hard. Like when I read the breakdown afterwards of the test, I was just like, oh my god, this is so fucking accurate. It really blew my mind. And I've heard a lot of people say that it's freakishly accurate, the test. So you should try it yourself, actually. 16personalities.com, in case you want to check it out. The test in itself is free, but they will try to sell you something at the end. But you can choose yourself if you want to go forward with that or not. Either way, it's not like clickbaity, scammy kind of things. It's actually, the test is very much genuine and very much it is what it says it is. And then they try to sell you stuff on top of that instead of trying to like bait you in. So I appreciate that. That being said, though, since they are trying to sell you stuff, they're probably going a little bit light on the negative tones of your personality. Keep that in mind. Take that with a bit of salt, a grain of salt, because it doesn't pay to piss off your customers if you're trying to sell something. So I think they're being very politically correct, or like very gentle with your negative sides. I think that if you actually talk to a psychologist or somebody who would do this test, they would be a lot harder on you. But it was still a very fun read for me. And again, my mind was absolutely blown over how accurately they described me, and how accurately they got me pinned down. Fantastic stuff. Either way, that's going to be all for today's Sunday Snippet. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please be nice to my daughter when she walks out into the world in a few years. And yeah, you'll be seeing more of me pretty soon, but I'm going to say bye-bye for now. So, bye-bye.